Welcome back. We're in chapter 12 here, continuing our conversation on racism. Hope the last few weeks have been blessed as you've worked through these real sensitive issues and that you've continued to learn about what our call is as Christians. Today's subject is racism versus new racism. What happens when those two things meet? And as I'm quoting you here, as you write in your study, the key point of this lesson is, if you see race in everything, it will become how a person defines themselves and others, is what you say.
Yeah, and this is quite true, and this is something that ends up being some of the result of cultural Marxism. That cultural Marxism, again, what it does is it divides people. Mm-hmm. It dehumanizes people. Again, you're no longer a person named Guy that God created and redeemed. You're simply a sum of your categories. Mm-hmm. And then once that happens, then what really happens is a person is defined. Okay. You're defined by that. And that's simply then who you are. You're just those categories. And then one of those categories, the big one today, is race. That you are simply white in your case. That's all you are. That's it. And then whatever we define then as cultural Marxists define what white might mean, or what black might mean, or fill in your blank for whatever particular race you were born. And this is what happens. And so you actually then end up seeing race in everything. If I could, for a second, I want to go back to a part of the Bible study in earlier chapters I always thought was just really helpful in understanding this. It's a story that really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't have any real bearing on things, but it just was a great illustration. It was, I think you've seen it in the Bible study, where there was a professor at Ohio State, and if you know anything about Ohio State, they love their college football at Ohio State. And so he just wrote a simple little, I'd call it a puff piece article. I wrote it at just how, with people coming out of COVID, it was nice to have the game of football back, where people can be out in the outdoors and they could be brought together as a group instead of divided. Mm-hmm. And he was absolutely criticized up and down and issued one of the biggest apologies that you've seen, because his article was racist. And I had to think, and I had to figure out what this was, and I was thankful for his follow-up apology, just from the standpoint of learning what it was. And it was the idea that from the cultural Marxist perspective, if you see everything from the perspective of power dynamics, okay, remember, oppressed versus press is how you see the whole world in that regard. So instead of watching a football game with a talented quarterback throwing to pass with an amazing catch or a big hit, or I'm a big football fan, I even like watching pulling linemen, for crying out loud, all you're seeing is a power dynamic. This is a white society using black athletes for their own entertainment, and thus putting on them, the football players, the responsibility of healing society of its woes, including COVID. They're seeing the entire game not just as, it's a football game. And this is one of the things that happens here with our new form of racism. That even watching a football game can be a form of racism.
Yeah, I try not to be flippant, but it seems like that this cultural Marxism literally ruins every good thing. It comes in and takes things that are harmless and have always been things we can agree on.
And the cultural Marxists are very clear about this, that racism pervades, they'll say, one after another, every single aspect of life in society.
And if you go back to then 7 decades ago, the intentionality of capturing all the cultural institutions, racism seems like a pretty easy way to literally take anything, including college football, and remove those
Yeah.
as an impediment to Marxist views.
Yeah, and how hard and the struggle, long the struggle was to actually have the rights that should have been there all along, and how this harms then what I would say the fight against racism as Scripture defines it.
There's a movie, remember the Titans? You've seen this movie?
Yes.
It just seems like that movie would be offensive.
Yeah.
According to this, where
Yep.
two race, white football players and black football players are joined together. They go off site. They come together as one team.
Again, one more time, and I hate to be a broken record, but whereas Christianity and cultural Marxism simply are not compatible with one another at all, the same is true with this matter of race. That this definition, the traditional definition of racism that most of us have grown up with and learned and is consistent with Scripture, it's not at all compatible with this new definition of racism that finds its home in cultural Marxism.
Yeah, which divides and pits against one another. You know, it's again, I don't mean to make light of it, but that would have been a very different movie. And remember the Titans, rather than the feel good, it would have just been an ongoing, continued problem. So, well, blessings on your study as you continue to work through this sensitive topic. May the Lord bless you, and we'll see you next time.